And then what we do often is we think, oh, this compassion thing doesn't work, so I'll stop it. But that's not the case. Compassion works. What's missing here is the wisdom. So it's not like compassion doesn't work. What's missing is the wisdom. So rather than stopping being compassionate if people are taking advantage of us, is continue to be compassionate but add the wisdom. Meaning that if someone tries to take advantage of us, be very firm with that and not allow that to happen. That's the wisdom part. So it's very important when we're cherishing others, or in compassion in general, to make sure always wisdom is there. Otherwise, people will take advantage of us.
I'm a bit confused about the self-cherishing.
Sure.
Isn't it in some ways a good thing as well?
It's never a good thing. So what we need to understand is the word. Self-cherishing is nothing to do with feeling good about ourselves. That's to have self-confidence and feeling good about ourselves is something completely other than self-cherishing. So probably that's where we're thinking that self-cherishing is good. Of course, we are to cultivate good self-esteem, self-confidence, and feel good about ourselves. But that's nothing to do with self-cherishing. So self-cherishing is simply the selfish, self-centered attitude that sees my happiness is more important than anyone else. That's it. That's self-cherishing.
But it can go together with cherishing others or not?
No, they're antithetical. Okay. Because this is seeing my happiness as more important than the happiness of others. This is not.
The advantages you pointed out for cherishing others sounded very selfish to me, because it's I will be happier, I will be less envious.
I was hoping someone would bring this up. It's an important point. Here we're talking about overcoming self-cherishing and just cherishing others. But the reality is, our life, like attachment, is pervaded by being selfish at many levels. To the point, like subtle selfishness is if we do something good for someone, expecting them at least to say thank you. No? That's a subtle form of selfishness.
Just to feel good about yourself.
So of course we're trying to overcome being selfish altogether. But the reality is, that's going to take a long time. So if we have the idea that we're going to do something good, but then we notice some selfishness in our motivation. If we stop ourselves from doing something good because we're doing it for a selfish reason, we're never going to do anything good. So rather, we should follow the advice from the Dalai Lama, who says, okay, if you have to be selfish, at least be selfish in a smart way. Now we're selfish in a dumb way, meaning we harm others in the pursuit of our happiness. That's dumb selfishness, because they're just going to harm us back. We're going to have a lot of suffering. Smart selfishness, as you probably indicating, is saying, okay, is to understand that our happiness is dependent on the people around us. So if I look after the people around me, they're more likely to look after me. That's smart selfishness. So if we start with smart selfishness and do good things for a good reason, with a bit of a selfish motivation, hoping or expecting something back, that's already a step in the right direction. Then, on that basis, whenever we engage in any behaviour, if we notice selfish motivation, try to reduce it as much as possible, but still do the good action. And if you keep doing that, what you're going to notice over time is that the joy you get from merely helping others will far outweigh any joy of getting anything in return. So you'll find over time your motivation to help others will get less and less and less selfish. That's a practical way to become completely unselfish. If we demand, now I'm only going to help others if there's no selfishness, we're not going to do anything. In fact, a very nice study I heard about that someone did. They had two groups of people, and each group of people at the beginning of the day got $100 to spend. one group had to spend the $100 on themselves. The other group had to spend the $100 on someone else. And then they measured the level of happiness of the two groups at the end of the day. The group who had to spend the money on others were more happy than the group who spent the money on themselves. Any more questions so far? Okay, I'll continue on then. So the fourth step is exchanging self with others. So on the basis of having reflected on the disadvantages of self-cherishing and reflecting on the advantages of cherishing others, then from this we're going to develop the wish to replace our self-cherishing attitude with the attitude of cherishing others. So this is what exchanging self with others means. It means in our daily life, if we notice some selfish motivation coming in, to reduce and replace that as much as possible with a motivation of cherishing others. So that's what exchanging self with others means. To exchange or replace the current self-cherishing attitude with the attitude of cherishing others as much as we can in our daily life. Then, of course, to really go further with this, then we need to internalize. We need to meditate. And so then we have a meditation practice. The meditation practice, Tibetan word of Tong Len, literally giving and taking. And this is the practice we did last night. And we're going to do this practice again this evening. This is a very powerful practice to really transform self-cherishing into cherishing others. Because as we saw in last night's practice, giving and taking, in this practice, we're imagining taking on the suffering of others, and we're imagining giving our happiness away to others. This is very powerful because the last thing that the selfish mind would want to do would be to take on any suffering from anyone. And the last thing the selfish mind would want to do would be to give away any happiness to anyone. So by imagining doing that, we are really crushing our self-cherishing mind and increasing the mind of cherishing others. So we did that practice last night. I'd just like to add a couple more things now about the practice. Again, with this Tonglen practice, like in the four immeasurables, the loving kindness and compassion, it's recommended to develop it in stages. To do this Tonglen practice first with someone close to us, then people we don't know very well, slowly more difficult people, and then out to everyone. But again, if we're not kind and compassionate to ourselves, start there. And so that's what we did last night. We did 2 of those steps. We did first ourselves and then someone close to us. This evening we're going to sort of go out a little bit further, continue on. Now, again, remember in this practice, we're imagining taking on the suffering of others and imagining giving our happiness away to them. When this is explained, then sometimes people have some doubts about the practice. And one of the most common doubts is, well, if I'm doing this with someone who's got some serious illness, and I imagine taking it on, maybe I'll get that illness myself. So no need to worry, because we can't actually take anyone's sickness on. We're only imagining doing that, and it's our willingness to take their sickness that is actually crushing the self-cherishing mind. And it's our willingness to give away our happiness that is crushing the self-cherishing mind. So actually in this meditation, the main beneficiary is ourself, because we are reducing selfishness, increasing the mind of cherishing others. But of course, that doesn't mean others don't benefit. Others benefit in 2 ways. First, is if we do this practice effectively, it means outside of the practice, we're more likely to help others in a much more genuine way. Because now we often help people close to us, but often, you know, I know best, you need to do this. So we're not really caring for them purely. We have our own agenda often. So in this practice, we can eliminate that and really be more purely helping others for their sake, not because I know best. Also, we're going to start to help people that we don't help normally, because now, you know, sort of strangers, maybe we go, well, I don't care about them. So if we do this, we may find that if we have an opportunity to help others, we'll be more likely to help others. The other way in which we can directly benefit others, and I think there's some scientific evidence to support this, is that particularly if we have some connection with the person, then due to the interconnected nature of everything, if we mentally do this practice of taking their suffering, giving them happiness, then we can, at a very subtle level, have a direct positive impact on that person's mind, even if they're on the other side of the planet. And I think there's some scientific evidence to support this.
It's like a prayer. It's like, it's the same. It's similar to like when we pray.
Yeah. And I wanted to add something on this. Unfortunately, modern studies have shown that if, for example, we pray for someone to get better, and we tell them we're praying for them, it actually has a slight negative impact, because somehow people feel under pressure now. So modern studies have shown that if we pray or even do this practice for others, then best is to do it anonymously. And also, of course, if we're praying or doing this practice and we tell people, it can be a bit of a sign of, you know, I'm helping you. You know that? So it can also be a bit of selfishness. Whereas if we do things anonymously, there's no place for the selfish motivation to come in.
Glen is also a sick person can do it, or it's not allowed?
No. So, and that's the next point I want to mention, then I think we've got some questions here, is we can do this, like I said, starting with ourselves and then others, but in daily life there's a couple of very practical applications for this. So, of course, we can do this in a form of meditation, which we did last night and tonight, but also we can use this idea in daily life in a very practical way. A couple of ways we can do that. One, of course, is in our daily life, if we see someone at work or in our travels or whatever who's obviously got some sort of mental or physical problem, we can do this exercise in one breath. On the in-breath, take their suffering. On the out-breath, give them happiness. So this is cultivating loving kindness and compassion, because then we have some trigger to remind us to be kind and compassionate. Great. Another thing we can do is, if we're about to meet someone in daily life, maybe at work, and we anticipate it's going to be a difficult meeting and we might react negatively, then as we're actually approaching this person, we can do this exercise. We can simply take away their suffering, give them happiness, rather than approaching them on the defensive and then just reacting to everything they say. We can do this practice to be more open and receptive. So often this can help difficult situations which we anticipate are about to arise. Another way in which it can be very helpful in daily life is if we have some sort of physical or even mental illness or problem, is often when we have some physical illness or we're caught up in some sort of mental disturbance, we get self-absorbed. And, you know, we have some physical illness. Oh, poor me, poor me, poor me. And all that does is it magnifies the suffering we experience. So if instead of wallowing in our own self-pity, we do this exercise and go, okay, maybe I'm not the only person on the planet who's got a migraine headache now. So by me willingly accepting this, may all others be free of their migraine headaches. So then we can take the migraine headaches off of everyone else and then give them happiness.
So, very sick people, I work with very sick people like cancer,
In fact, there's a lot of work being done with this very practice with cancer people with very positive results.
So they take
Should be the other way around.
yeah,
No.
I hear.
No, exactly that. Is that this is very much healing practice.
For themselves.
Yes.
They do it.
Yes,
They do the
yes, 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 exactly.
The translation of tongue Glen is giving and taking.
Yeah, giving and taking.
Tongue is giving and Glen is taking.
Yeah, exactly, literally.
I wanted to ask about, I think that when you think about others suffering, that can really be overwhelming.
Right.
So
Therefore, as I suggested, it's recommended to start in stages. And also, when you start with someone close to you, don't pick someone who's got some huge problem as a beginning point, because it will overwhelm us, because we're not used to doing it. So start small. Pick someone that's got some minor problem and do that.
because you can't really give something when you're like sinking in
Right.
despair or
Right. So actually, what you'll find, it's our self-cherishing that overwhelms us. Because self-cherishing is looking out, obsessed about me and my happiness. So if someone's suffering, then healthy, we have sadness for that. We have compassion. But it's not their suffering that overwhelms us. What overwhelms us is our aversion to that. Oh, I don't like the look of that. I don't like that. So it's actually self-cherishing that causes us to be overwhelmed.
Yes, but a second thing that can make you overwhelmed is if you feel like everything is suffer and there's too much suffer, then the suffer that you can handle with.
Right. So therefore, the solution is to do it in small steps. Because if we do it in small steps and slowly reduce our self-cherishing, what you will notice is that you'll be able to face bigger and bigger things without it overwhelming us. Because already our self-cherishing is being reduced. And then you'll find that you can take on more and more and more, and it won't overwhelm us. So yes, it's very helpful, and that's what's recommended, to do it step by step. Don't take on everything at the start, because our self-cherishing will go, and we will be overwhelmed.
So if you practice laying,
Yeah.
you should think of like a single person, single suffering, and not like bombard yourself with like
Don't bombard
two
yourself
people.
with all the problems in the world.
just one to focus.
Start
to
small.
have it.
Start small, and as you start to work in this practice, and then as the self-cherishing starts to reduce, then you can slowly
Take on more.
bigger, bigger, bigger. And you'll need to do that to progress. Like, a similar example is, you know, we're trying, one of the things, qualities we're developing in the spiritual path is patience. Of course, if as a beginner we subject ourselves to conditions where people are very much attacking us, it's too much. So we pick small things, maybe small things that irritate us, and work with that. You know, in those environments, to be patient with small things, and then slowly over time, we can be more patient with bigger things. But we'll need to find those to develop patience. No one has developed patience fully when everyone is kind to them. To fully develop patience, you need people testing you. But as a beginner, not too much, just a little bit. But as we progress, we'll actually need more to continue. So what you find is the so-called, you know, we talked about levels of practitioner, the more middling and advanced, they go searching for obnoxious people to test them. They need them. And so often you find they're my most holy teacher. In fact, there's a story about that, and then there's a time for a break. I said this Lam Rim was brought to Tibet by great Indian master Lama Atisha. So when he came to Tibet, he had an attendant with him that he brought who was completely obnoxious. And the Tibetan said to him, "Why have you got this person? He's completely obnoxious." And Lama Atisha told the Tibetans, he's my most holy teacher. He picked him specifically for that reason. We don't need to do that. That's too much for us. But we get the understanding, start small, and then eventually, as we progress, we will need to find these sort of people to go further. So similarly with this practice, don't take on the troubles of the world, because it'll overwhelm you, because your self-cherishing will go, oh, it's too much. But as we do it slowly, step by step, and self-cherishing reduces, eventually you will be able to do that, no problem. But that's longer term, so step by step. Otherwise, it's overwhelming and it's counterproductive. Any other question? Oh yes, sorry, I forgot about it.
I just had this understanding of what it means. Yesterday when we tried it, I thought, do I wish myself an illness of some sort? I didn't think that's the point, like to wish myself to have the infliction that someone else has.
No.
And also I felt that even to take in stuff like the experience, like the anxiety someone else has, their ignorance, to think how I would deal with it, how I would purify it, also has some residue that would be, I would need strength to be able to purify that.
So remember, as we did in the practice last night, and we're going to do tonight, the part of the practice, what it means is the actual willingness to take and the willingness to give. That's the key element. And then when you take, then we don't want to do the old cognitive fusion and take it and hold on to it and identify with it. Because that's what we do now with our own suffering. We identify with it and hold on to it and we punish ourselves. So if we use this practice to take someone else's suffering to hold on to it and punish ourselves, of course, we're not doing the practice correctly. So when we take it on, and we did this in the practice last night, you imagine it dissolving in this light at your heart, completely dissolving. So this is the practice. So of course, as you probably mentioned here, is if you look at someone suffering, you take it and identify with it and hold on to it. Of course, that's punishing yourself. As we do with our own suffering now, you know, we have some suffering, we identify with it and hold on to it, and we suffer even more. So of course we're not to do that in this practice.
I think there's some trick here. I understand that in order not to take someone else's suffering, like something I could do is say that, well, we're interdependent. I already have that suffering. I already have that sort of ignorance. No? Maybe that's a way to take it without...
But again, the whole purpose of this practice is the willingness to do that. And then when you take it, see, suffering comes from mental afflictions. And this practice, the way I've explained it, this light here, this purity of mind, Buddha nature, is a little bit also, we can say, inner wisdom. And it's wisdom which destroys mental afflictions and suffering. So by taking that on, we are symbolizing the fact that wisdom is destroying that mental affliction or suffering. That's the symbolism of dissolving into that light when we do that practice. Otherwise, if we take it and hold it and identify with it, then it's cognitive fusion as we normally do, and then of course we're just going to punish ourselves. So we don't want to do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, very last question.
I wanted to ask if Tongling is like a mystical practice, where
No.
it's to practice the giving, the ability of, like, it's to go through a process of compassion and thinking about others. It's like self-practice. It's not like directed towards others. Like it is, but it's having that experience, and that experience in your mind can create like other experiences.
Yeah.
Right?
So again,
I'm trying to cure someone and
No. Again, the main beneficiary of this practice is you. By reducing your selfishness, increasing your cherishing others, increasing your love and compassion for others. On top of that, if you do this practice mentally with someone, and particularly if you have some connection with them, according to Buddhism, and there's scientific support for this, you can have a direct positive impact on their mind. So you shouldn't underestimate the power of the mind. And we sort of know that at a very simple level. Like if someone comes in the room and they're radiating compassion, they often have a very positive direct impact on us without them saying anything, don't they? That's the power of the mind. So similarly here, we shouldn't underestimate the power of the mind to have a direct positive impact on that person's mind. And then, of course, the second factor is if we do this and develop our love and compassion for others, it means outside of meditation, we're more likely to help others in a more pure way. So it translates into more compassionate activities for others as well. Okay, time for a break. So have a break. We'll come back at 5:15. And the meditation we're going to do is the second and third point. Is we're going to reflect on the disadvantages of self-cherishing and reflect on the advantages of cherishing others to really develop this aspiration to replace our selfish attitude with the attitude of cherishing others. So that's meditation we're going to do next. So come back at 5:15.